Hi friends, it's Lisa with Forever Bloom. I wanted to put together a quick DIY tutorial on how to put this pumpkin and gourd shelf sitter together. Super cute. I love the Simply Blessed tag, the little acorn on the pumpkin with the fall. We're going to go ahead and start color sorting. I am doing a voiceover, so bear with me. I am going to use painter's tape as I color sort. Painter's tape just helps hold down your pieces while you paint. We are going to paint fall and orange, the top of the acorn, a dark brown, and the buttons, a dark brown. We're going to do an ombre effect on the leaves, and the pumpkin will be burnt orange. And then I'm going to probably paint the sunflower like a marigold, a yellow. Alright, so I'm going to go in with my color match that I got at Home Depot of Deco Arts Burlap, and I'm going to paint the lower section of the acorn. I like to use makeup sponges to apply my paint. You can use paintbrushes, whatever method that you prefer to use. This is for inspiration, so and then I'm going to use deep burgundy on the heart. Again, these are Deco Art colors, Deco Art paint colors. And I'm going to use burnt orange for the pumpkin. And so right now I'm going to work on the leaf. I'm going to use burnt orange and deep ochre for the leaf. And I'm going to do an ombre effect. So I did half the sponge burnt orange, the other half, I think it's either deep ochre or marigold. It's probably deep ochre. And then I just kind of dab the sponge on a surface until those two paint colors blend together in the middle. And then I take the makeup sponge and I leave the lighter color towards the center and then just go around the entire leaf until I get the effect that I like. You can also, if you don't want to do the ombre effect, you could paint the whole leaf deep ochre and then float burnt orange around the edges with the angle brush. That's an option. And we'll just repeat the process on the lower half of the leaves. I like to keep repositioning my piece just so that I feel comfortable at the angle that I'm painting. All right, I think that looks good. I also like to keep baby wipes on hand to wipe the paint off my fingers or any mistakes that I make. And just clean up my area that I blended my sponge on. All right, so I'm going to use burnt orange and I'm going to color the center where the pumpkin is. You don't have to be perfect down by the acorn because the acorn's going to lay on top. Get a nice layer of burnt orange down, and then we'll set it to the side and let that dry. And then I'm going to paint the pumpkin. And you only need to worry about the edges because the middle piece that we just painted will go in the middle. Excuse me. And if you made it this far in my tutorial, welcome. My name is Lisa. I'm with Forever Bloom. If you enjoy DIY painting tutorials like this, make sure to come find me over on Whatnot. There should be a link in my bio section on my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. I'm not quite sure where you're looking at this video from, but if you're not familiar with Whatnot, it is a live shopping app where you can watch sellers live, chat, shop, grab some fun finds. I sell these DIY wood kits on Whatnot, and I cut all these pieces out myself. I have a laser that I use. I love coming back here on YouTube and over on Facebook to share painting tutorials so you can create right along with me. And if you are new to Whatnot, make sure to use my refer a friend link in the description below, because you'll get a $25 credit to use towards your purchase. I'm not quite sure how long this $25 credit is. It was $15, so it could change. Just be aware of that. And it's free money. Who doesn't love free money? Once you find me, be sure to follow me and bookmark my upcoming shows so that you'll know when I'm going live. I'd love to have you come hang out with me and shop some of my DIY kits and create some projects with me. So there was my sales pitch. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel too. All right, so we got a nice good layer of burnt orange on our pumpkin. And using a makeup sponge, it always applies a thin layer so it dries really quick, where you can go in on top of the first layer with the second layer pretty fast. So I'm adding a second layer of burnt orange to the middle section. All right, now moving on to the gourd. I'm going to paint the gourd light buttermilk. Wow, that was quick. I went ahead and sped up the video. All right, now we're going to use deep worker and paint the sunflower. This will definitely need more than one coat of paint. And then I'm going to use dark chocolate for the top of the acorn and the buttons. add another layer of deep burgundy. All right, I'm going to take this makeup sponge and I'm just going to cut it down in half lengthwise. I want a thinner width of a sponge. And then I grabbed some deep ochre and some burnt umber, and I'm gonna go over the leaves one more time. I feel like the whole makeup sponge was just a little too thick, and I'm hoping that with the shorter width of the sponge, I can get a little bit more detail in the ombre. So just go around your leaf until you're happy. And repeat the process on the base layer of the leaf. And you just need to paint the actual leaf that's engraved on the base layer because the leaf we were just working on will go on top and create a 3D look. Add another layer of deep ochre to the flower. Another layer of dark chocolate to the top of the acorn and the buttons. And then going back in with burlap for a second coat on the acorn. Cleaning up some of my mess that I made when I ombre'd the leaves. Don't mind the shaking of the video. All right, we're gonna go back in with another layer of light buttermilk. All right, went ahead and sped through that. And next, I'm gonna add another layer to the acorn, the top of the acorn and the buttons. I'm gonna paint the word fall in burnt orange. And I'm gonna paint the Simply Blessed tag using burlap. You wanna make sure to use just a little bit of paint on the sponge and very light pressure so the paint doesn't go down into the letters like I just did. So I'm going to finish painting this tag, and then I'm going to go in with a Q-tip and clean out that paint the best I can. Sometimes I will even dab the Q-tip in water and then try and erase it, but it usually cleans out pretty good. You could also dip like a Q-tip or anything that you have that's thin enough to go in a lettering with like a brown paint and kind of just fill in. You want to make sure that the object that you're using to fill in the line, the engraved line, is smaller than the engraved line so that it goes into the lettering and doesn't make a mess. And then I just wiped. I didn't like how it looked, so I just kind of used a baby wipe and wiped off that area and went back over it with burlap. All right, one more coat of dark chocolate. I think I'm just trying to use up my paint that I have on my paint palette. And then I'm going to go over the tag one more time with burlap. All right, gonna go in for another layer of light buttermilk on this guy. And I went ahead and sped through that process. You didn't need to watch me paint it all over again. Just adding more layers to these pieces. I had a little bit of extra paint on my paint palette that I wanted to use up. All right, so since this base has 3 layers, on the bottom layer, I'm just gonna paint the very bottom that goes on the counter. And then I'm gonna use the wet baby wipe method. So I just fold up a baby wipe, dip it in the paint, and then just wipe the paint on. It gives it a faux stained look. And I apologize, I'm not in the camera view. It's just simply wiping paint on. I will paint the top of this because the top piece is a little smaller and you'll see the raw wood if you didn't. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. And then painting the top of the top piece. I just used my Q-tip because I got a little bit of paint down in the slot there and I don't want it to hinder gluing it together. Okay, we're going to do the same method on the second base. I'm just adding some dark chocolate to the gourd stem. I'm going to add a bow, so I'm not too worried about making sure that the stem, that I have a straight line. And I'll need more than one coat, so. And we'll go ahead and add the dark chocolate to the pumpkin. You can just follow the engraved lines, but you don't have to be perfect because the middle piece will cover it. And then I'm just kind of layering my objects down and see how it looks. And gluing it down. I like to use art glitter glue. And just line up the edges. Doing the same thing with the top of the acorn. Just make sure everything is lined up with the edges. And then I'm going to add the heart to the middle of the acorn. You just follow the engraved lines. And then I'm going to add the button to the center of the flower. I'm going to lightly put a layer of glue around the word fall. And then it's going to go on the acorn. I will dab it before placing it onto the counter and clean up the glue later. That just removes any excess glue, so it prevents some glue seepage. Alright, now let's glue together the base. I'm glad I lined this up before I glued it because I realized that I needed to paint the other side as well. And when gluing together bases, you want to make sure that the slot that the pumpkin or shelf sitter is going into, everything is lined up. I usually like taking the actual shelf sitter and putting it inside the base just to confirm that everything is lined up, because if it shifts, you ain't getting that pumpkin in that slot. And that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm just making sure the pumpkin fits into the base. All right, I'm gonna add another layer of dark chocolate to the stem of the gourd. And the pumpkin. All right. Now that that base is probably set a little bit, let's get to floating some paint around the pumpkin to add a little more depth. So I'm going to use deep burgundy. I'm just going to add a little bit to my paint palette. I am going to use a angle brush that I purchased from Michaels. I will need a baby wipe and a glass of water. I like to get my paintbrush wet, dab it on the baby wipe until I can see like the water kind of disappear from the bristles on the brush, dip the tip of the angle brush into the paint, and then go around my object just on the outer edges that I want to float the color on. So I went ahead and sped up my video so you don't have to sit here and watch me float color around my objects for the next several minutes, but I went ahead and used dark chocolate to shadow the acorn. And I'm using my number 2 liner brush that I got from Michaels. Excuse me, and adding a highlight. We picked up these daubers off of Amazon. I was looking for some bigger options. Okay. Now I'm going to flow dark chocolate around the gourd. Okay, and now I want to add a little bit of texture to the gourd, so I'm using the stencil and a makeup sponge, and I'm very lightly going over the circles with dark chocolate. And I'm just going to put the circles in a corner to give it just a little bit of character. Now I'm lining up everything and gluing stuff together. Now I'm going to go in with my dotting tool and add 3 little dots at the end of each of my swoops. Alright. I slowed this back down as I am putting on the finishing touches. I am going to use some fabric that I got from Jubilee Fabrics. And I am going to make a fabric bow. So bear with me as I am straightening out my fabric. It wants to curl because I ripped it. So one way I like to do a fabric bow is to make 2 loops and then take those loops and just tie them in a knot. I feel like this is less bulky. I have other videos on YouTube here that shows you another method of making a fabric bow if you're interested. And I apologize being out of the screen, but I'm just playing with the fabric bow until I get it to the size that I want. Just making sure my loops are even. And then I'm going to add some raffia as well. So I'm just looping it about the same size as the bow. And once I get it to the right size, I'm going to place that in the middle of the bow, and then I'm going to use my jute string and just tie it in, tie it around the bow. And then I'm going to add the tag. And then I'm going to tie it to the gourd. So I'm going to take the hemp under the bow tail and then up and around. And then I'll flip it on the face of the gourd and then tie a knot in the back. You could also, if you have enough of the jute string, wrap it back around and then just tie a bow like you're tying a shoe in the front, and it'll give it another layer of material. And before I cut the strings, I'm just looking at it, and I decided to use the leftover strings and make a bow. So I'm just tying it like a shoelace. Gives me just one more layer. Super cute. I like it. So here I am trimming down the fabric bow tails. Not the greatest scissors for this. And then I'm going to cut the loops of the raffia so that it's a little more frayed and scrunch that up. You can also like peel the raffia apart if it's too thick. I like to take my scraping tool and just peel it apart. You can also peel it apart with just your fingers. Make it more stringy. And crunch it up. Make it wild. Repeating the same method on the other side. Cute. And then I'm going to add the button to the center of the bow. I used hot glue. And let it sit for a second as it sets up. Perfect. Alright, now I'm gluing on the sunflower. Alright, that one's done. Now I need to make a bow, a fabric bow for the pumpkin. I'm going to do the same method where I just make 2 loops and then tie them together just by looping it around, similar to tying a shoe, but I didn't create a, like, I guess a starting knot. Just tying the bunny ears together. And straightening out my bow. And it wants to curl because I ripped the fabric to get the frayed look. And then I'm going to grab some raffia and do the same thing I did to the gourd. I'm just going to loop it around. And line it up in the middle there. I decided it was a little too thick, so I took some of the raffia off. And holding it in the middle and adding a jute string and tying the raffia to the bow. And then I'm going to cut down my bow tails. And then I'm going to take that jute string and tie this bow onto the stem of the pumpkin. And tying a knot in the back. And this time I went ahead and snipped the jute string and I added a little dot of glue just to hold that knot together. using the end of my scraping tool to smooth out the hot glue. Cute. Just kind of playing with my bow, repositioning it. And then I'm going to go through and cut the raffia loops. And then scrunch it. And then we're going to add my button to the middle. And I'm going to use my scraping tool to kind of peel the pieces of raffia apart. And glue my leaves down. I'm holding them down because the bow's kind of pushing them up a little bit. It just fell because it hadn't dried enough to hold it in there. So we are just going to let that sit for a couple minutes or seconds. Pretty cute. Okay, well, these two, the pumpkin and the gourd, are done, and I think I'm going to call that this video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this, and have a wonderful day.